Novice set, 2017, round 2. Number 1. This American artist first studied in Philadelphia, and one of her fellow students was Thomas Eakins. This artist painted The Boating Party and The Child's Bath while living in France, and was close friends with fellow impressionist Edgar Degas. One of this artist's last shows was the 1913 Armory Show in New York City, before she was forced to stop painting due to the onset of blindness. For 10 points, name this female impressionist artist whose works were inspired by Japanese woodblock paintings and who lived much of her life in Paris. The answer is Mary Cassatt. Number 2. This British author studied medicine before beginning his writing career, and his first published work, The Mystery of Sasasa Valley, was set in South Africa. This author was struggling with an independent medical practice when he introduced his most famous character in 1886, A Study in Scarlet. This author appeared to kill off this character in 1893's The Final Problem, but he brought the character back in 1903's The Adventure of the Empty House due to fan protest. For 10 points, name this British author who created the detective character Sherlock Holmes and his friend Dr. Watson. The answer is Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Number 3. This man was admitted to the bar in 1782 after taking a break from his studies at Litchfield Law School because of the American Revolution. This man beat out General Philip Schuyler for a seat in the U.S. Senate, which ignited a famous rivalry with Schuyler's son-in-law, a fellow lawyer. This man blamed that rival for his losses in both the 1800 U.S. presidential election and the 1804 New York gubernatorial election. For 10 points, name this man who, while Vice President of the United States, shot and killed Alexander Hamilton in a duel in 1804. The answer is Aaron Burr. Number 4. German mathematician Gottfried Leibniz defined this as the line through a pair of infinitely close points on the curve, while Euclid made a reference to it as it related to a circle. This trigonometric function, squared plus 1 equals secant squared. Both this function and its cofunction have a period of pi. This function can be described as sine over cosine and is undefined at odd multiples of pi halves. For 10 points, name this function described as the opposite side of an oblique angle over the adjacent side in a right triangle. And the answer is tangent. Number 5. A third group of these entities was first observed in 2013, but were destroyed by a powerful shockwave from the sun. These entities are located in the inner region of the Earth's magnetosphere, and their existence was confirmed by the 1958 Explorer 1 and Explorer 3 missions. The charged particles in these entities are largely protons and electrons, and solar winds are thought to be the cause of their existence. For 10 points, name these belts in the Earth's upper atmosphere where radio particles are located, and which can endanger orbiting satellites with their radiation. And those would be Van Allen radiation belts. Number 6. This river, which originates with the confluence of the Breg and Brigade rivers, was once referred to as the River of Kings. This river, which originates in the Black Forest of southern Germany, was once considered the northern frontier of the Roman Empire, and its longest tributary is the Sava. This river flows through 10 European countries before emptying into the Black Sea in eastern Romania. For 10 points, name this river, the second longest in Europe, which flows through Eastern Europe and forms a large portion of the Romanian-Bulgarian border. The answer is the Danube River. Number 7. This Protestant denomination emerged out of a revival of the Church of England, and the two sibling leaders of it had created a holy club at Oxford. The leaders of this denomination, John and Charles Wesley, were inspired by George Whitefield and the First Great Awakening in America. The final break between this denomination and the Church of England occurred at the end of the Revolutionary War when John Wesley began ordaining priests. For 10 points, name this Protestant denomination whose followers were denounced for their strict adherence to the Scripture, which inspired John Wesley's name for the church. The answer is Methodists. Wesleyans is also acceptable. Number 8. One of these events was held in Knoxville, Tennessee in 1982, with the theme, quote, "Energy turns the world," unquote. Another of these events was held in St. Louis in 1904, coinciding with the Summer Olympics and the centennial of the Louisiana Purchase. Another of these events in the United States was termed, quote, "The World of Tomorrow," unquote, and was held in New York City on the eve of World War II. For 10 points, name these months-long events which are sanctioned as specialized, international, or universal, featuring new technological advancements and cultural exhibitions. And the answer is World's Fair. World Exhibition or International Exhibition are also acceptable if mentioned before those terms are mentioned. Number 9. In an early scene of this novel, the protagonist builds a water wheel at a nearby stream when he was supposed to have been tending the garden. This protagonist trades a dog to his neighbors, the Foresters, in order to acquire a shotgun with which to defend his land from Old Slewfoot, a giant black bear. The Foresters and the protagonist have a dispute over stolen pigs that ends with the latter adopting an orphaned fawn named Flag. For 10 points, name this novel in which Jody is forced to shoot Flag because he consumes the family's food crop, by Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings. And the answer is The Yearling. Number 10. This politician was a law clerk for Chief Justice William Rehnquist in 1996 and prepared testimony for the prosecution in President Clinton's impeachment hearings. He worked for George W. Bush's legal team in the 2000 election before becoming the Solicitor General of Texas in 2003. This politician returned to private law practice after the 2008 election, but won a surprising victory in the 2012 Texas Senate race as a Tea Party candidate. For 10 points, name this junior Texas senator who ran for the 2016 Republican nomination, finishing a close second to Donald Trump. And the answer is Raphael Edward Cruz, also known as Ted Cruz. Number 11. This process was first observed in corneal cells and occurs only in eukaryotic cells. This process is preceded by the S phase, in which DNA is replicated and is often paired with cytokinesis. Errors during this process can cause mutations such as cancer, but is intended for growth and repair. When this process ends, each set of chromosomes has its own nucleus, which are generally identical to one another. For 10 points, name this process of cellular division that results in two identical diploid daughter cells. And the answer is mitosis. Number 12. This composer was a piano prodigy at age 6, but a hand injury confined him to only composition after 1831. This composer was trained by Friedrich Wieck and later married Wieck's daughter Clara after an extensive legal battle. One of this man's early works, Papillons, Opus 2, introduced his idea of program music. This composer and his wife nurtured the early career of Johann Brahms, who would help popularize this man's works after his untimely death. For 10 points, name this German composer of Carnival and Fantasy in C, who died young due to mental issues. And the answer is Robert Schumann. Number 13. In 1849, William Manley and John Rogers crossed this landform in order to get food and water for members of their expedition who had gotten lost while traveling through it. An erosional field called Zabriskie's Point, located within this landform, was the setting for both a 1970 movie and the cover of U2's 1987 album, The Joshua Tree. This landform features the creosote bush, and its only profitable ore was borax. For 10 points, name this landform, which contains the lowest point in North America and is known for its harsh desert climate, located in the Mojave Desert in southeastern California. And the answer is Death Valley. The Mojave Desert was also acceptable before mentioning Zabriskie Point. Number 14. In this author's first novel, he described the financial struggles of the cousins Makar and Varvara. This author of Poor Folk struggled with gambling, and his socialist political activities nearly led to his execution by the Tsar's forces. Instead, he was exiled to Siberia for 5 years, which provided the inspiration for his most famous protagonist. That character commits a horrific double murder of a pawnbroker and her sister, but feels guilt about the crime, eventually leading to his confession to Petrovich. For 10 points, name this author, whose own hardships inspired his creations of Raskolnikov in his novel Crime and Punishment. And the answer to that one is Fyodor Dostoevsky. Number 15. This man started his career as a trapeze artist and was a champion cross-country runner in his youth while living in New York City. This man began his magical career as a duo with his brother Theodore on Coney Island. He became known for his ability to escape handcuffs, but later graduated to escaping from jails, straitjackets, packing crates, and other obstacles. In later years, this magician attempted to disprove spiritualists, which hurt his friendship with author Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. For 10 points, name this famous magician who died, according to legend, from punches to the stomach from a fan which induced peritonitis. And the answer to that one is Harry Houdini. Number 16. Ramon Gutierrez described the institution of marriages among these native people in his book When Jesus Came, the Corn Mothers Went Away. This Native American tribal group was the only one to successfully throw off a European colonial power when it revolted against the Spanish in 1680. Some individual tribes of this group practice matrilineal systems of inheritance, like the Carries. For 10 points, name these southwestern peoples who derive their name from the apartment-like structures they built on the sides of cliffs and whose individual tribes include the Hopi and Zuni. And the answer is the Puebloan peoples. Carries, Hopi, and Zuni were all acceptable before I mentioned them in the question. Number 17. This scientist was prematurely declared dead in an 1888 obituary that referred to him as, quote, a merchant of death, unquote. This scientist exiled himself after being accused of treason by his home country of France for selling smokeless gunpowder to Italy. This scientist's younger brother was killed in a nitroglycerin explosion, a precursor to his most famous invention, dynamite. For 10 points, name this Swedish chemist and inventor who was inspired by the mistaken obituary to bequeath most of his accumulated fortune to award an annual prize to those who have benefited mankind. And the answer is Alfred Nobel. Number 18. Dactylic meter is used in this poem to give the impression of horses galloping or the beating of drums. This poem also makes use of anaphora to convey the intense emotions and mood as the lines, quote, theirs was not to make reply, theirs but to do and die, unquote. This poem was supposedly written in a matter of minutes after the author read an article about the Battle of Balaclava in the Crimean War. For 10 points, name this poem that frequently repeats Into the Valley of Death rode the 600 to depict the title British cavalry written by Alfred Lord Tennyson. And the answer is The Charge of the Light Brigade. Number 19. This U.S. state's capital's population growth was stunted by battles in the French and Indian and Revolutionary Wars, which took place to its north. This city became the capital of its state in 1797 after sharing the role with cities like Poughkeepsie and Kingston. This capital city became a transportation hub with the completion of the Erie Canal in 1825, which began at the confluence of the Mohawk and Hudson Rivers just to the north of this capital city. For 10 points, name this city the site of a 1754 conference organized by Benjamin Franklin, the capital of New York. And the answer is Albany. Number 20. One story tells that this deity was born from Coatlicue, who already had 400 children. This god created the fifth world of mankind by sacrificing his own blood to give the bones of old species new life in the underworld, Mictlan. This deity, along with his brother Xolotl, were a conch shell or wind jewel, and many believe that Hernan Cortez was mistaken for this god when he arrived on the Mexican Gulf Coast. For 10 points, name this deity, the god of wind and learning in Aztec culture, whose name literally means feathered serpent. And the answer is Quetzalcoatl, or Ehecatl. Number 21. This politician was born in Virginia but moved to Kentucky where he had a plantation named Ashland. This man served as Kentucky's senator for a year while under the required age of 30. and his election to the U.S. House in 1810 and selection as Speaker of the House began a political career of over 40 years in Congress. For 10 points, name this politician who began his career as a, quote, war hawk, unquote, and helped shepherd the Missouri Compromise of 1820 and the Compromise of 1850 through Congress while running for president 5 separate times. And the answer is Henry Clay. And with that question, we have concluded round 2 of this series of packets entitled the Fort Osage Novice Set 2017.